Hi everyone, my name is Danny and today we will be discussing whether or not Purdue Pharmacy is the cause for the opioid crisis here in the United States. During this presentation, we're going to talk about what an opioid is, what addiction is, what the opioid crisis is, and who Purdue Pharmacy is, and whether or not they are in fact responsible for the opioid crisis. So, we have, what are opioids? Opioids are a classification of drugs derived from or synthesized to mimic opium. Morphine, the most abundant natural opioid found in opium, was used for years to relieve pain. As medicine advanced, scientists found ways to replicate the effects of morphine to make it stronger or weaker, depending on the need. Some opioids, like methadone, were developed due to the scarcity of morphine, while others, like heroin and Oxycontin, were made in an attempt to be less addictive. Today, opioids are almost synonymous with pain relief. Some examples of opioids are Oxycontin, Demerol, Dilaudid, fentanyl, heroin, hydrocodone, methadone, morphine, oxycodone, and tramadol. What is the opioid crisis? The opioid crisis, otherwise known as the opioid epidemic, specifically refers to the growing number of deaths and hospitalizations from opioids, including both prescription and illicit drugs. In recent years, death rates from these drugs have skyrocketed to over 40,000 a year, or 115 a day in the United States. Drug overdose is now the leading cause of accidental death in the United States, largely due to the opioid epidemic. The opioid epidemic first gained notoriety around 2010, but factors behind it had begun several years earlier. So, what exactly is drug addiction? The American Society of Addiction Medicine defines addiction as a treatable, chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. Drug addiction, also called substance use disorder, is a disease that affects a person's brain and behavior and leads to an inability to control the use of legal or illegal drugs or medicine. When you're addicted, you may continue using the drug despite the harm it causes. Drug addiction can start with experimental use of a recreational drug in social situations. And for some people, the drug use becomes more frequent. For others, particularly with opioids, drug addiction begins when they take prescribed medications or receive them from others who have prescriptions. The risk of addiction and how fast you become addicted varies by drug. Some drugs, such as opioid painkillers, have a higher risk and cause addiction more quickly than others. As time passes, you may need larger doses of the drug to get high. Soon you may need the drug just to feel good. As your drug use increases, you may find that it's increasingly difficult to go without the drug. Attempts to stop drug use may cause intense cravings and make you feel physically ill. These are called withdrawal symptoms. Addiction is a chronic condition that can also result from taking medications. In fact, the misuse of opioids, particularly illicitly made fentanyl, causes nearly 50,000 deaths in the United States in 2019 alone. the addiction statistics and opioid use. So we have 9.7 million. So as of 2019, 9,700,000 Americans had taken prescription painkillers improperly. 80% of people that suffered from addiction to heroin started with a prescription for an opioid painkiller. Wow, 80%. $78.5 billion. So, the cost of prescription opioid misuse in the United States comes out to $78.5 billion annually. So, I put up some charts to represent exactly what's going on with this opioid epidemic and how Purdue has a big hand in the amount of people becoming addicted to opioids. So if you look at the chart to the left, we have from 2008 to 2010, the opioid sales increasing, the opioid deaths increasing, and the opioid treatment admissions increasing dramatically. And if you look to the right represents Purdue Pharmacy and their sale of their 80 milligram oxycodone pill. That is their strongest pill of oxycodone that they make. And their sales increased in 2008, 9, and 10. So more sales, more people that became addicted, and more deaths occurred between 2008 and 2010. So, who is Purdue and how does Purdue Pharmacy play a role in the opioid crisis? Purdue Pharmacy, formerly the Purdue Frederick Company, is an American privately held pharmaceutical company founded by John Purdue Gray. It was owned principally by members of the Sackler family as descendants of Mortimer and Raymond Sackler. The current opioid crisis ranks as one of the most devastating public health catastrophes of our time. It started in the mid-1990s when the powerful agent OxyContin, promoted by Purdue Pharmacy and approved by the Food and Drug Administration, triggered the first wave of death linked to use of legal prescription opioids. The crisis represents a multi-system failure of regulations. OxyContin, approved, is just one example. Purdue Pharmacy is said to have presented a fraudulent description of the drug OxyContin as less addicting than other opioids. The profit motive of the pharmaceutical industry remains ever present. Lawsuits involving Purdue Pharmacy. The Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharmacy, reached a deal with a group of attorney generals to pay up to $6 billion in cash to resolve widespread litigation alleging that they fueled the U.S. opioid epidemic, bringing the OxyContin maker close to exciting bankruptcy. New Hampshire initiated its investigation of opioid companies in 2015 and sued Purdue and its members of the Sackler family in 2017 and 2019, respectively, alleging that the Sacklers directed Purdue's strategy to sell their opioids through a deceptive marketing campaign that minimized the health risks of opioids and claimed that the prescription drugs were rarely the cause of abuse, addiction, or death. They reaped massive profits while opioid addiction skyrocketed. So, pretty much what we've learned previously is that opioids are one of the most addicting drugs out there. We've learned in the charts in the previous slides that as opioid sales increased, so did addiction, and so did deaths, and so did admissions for addictions due to opioids. So, Purdue Pharmacy, were they advertising falsely about the addiction rate? Did they know how addicting their drugs were? Look at the profits that they were making. We can argue, did they care? The settlement keeps intact provisions of the original Purdue bankruptcy plan, forcing the company to be dissolved or sold by 2024, and banning the Sacklers from engaging in the manufacture and sale of opioids. The original bankruptcy plan required Purdue and the Sacklers to make public over 30 million documents, and this too remains intact. The settlement announced forces disclosure of additional records previously withheld as privileged legal advice. The settlement is a product of a court-ordered mediation which began on January 3rd of 2022. Settlement highlights include: the Sacklers must pay $1 billion above the original bankruptcy plan, as well as an additional $175 million, which was previously conditioned on certain approvals, but which now must be paid on the bankruptcy effective date. The payments are spread over 18 years. The Sacklers must pay up to an additional $500 million in the event of sales of certain of their assets reaches a specific benchmark. The Sacklers must issue a statement of regret for their sole role in the opioid epidemic and to the victims whose lives have been devastated. The Sacklers family must allow institutions to remove the family name from buildings, scholarships, and fellowships. Responding to the state's request, the mediator triggered the bankruptcy court to require the Sacklers to participate in a March 9, 2022 public hearing where victims and their survivors would be given an opportunity to directly address the family. Purdue must make public additional documents previously withheld as privileged legal advice, including legal advice regarding advocacy before Congress, the promotion, sale, and distribution of Purdue opioids, structure of the Purdue Compliance Department, and its monitoring and abuse deterrence systems, and publicists related to the sale and marketing of opioids. States reserve the right to oppose non-consensual, non-debtor releases before the U.S. Supreme Court should an appeal be heard there. So we have some additional information linking Purdue Pharmacy to the opioid crisis. For more information regarding Purdue Pharmacy and their role in the opioid crisis, there is a docu-series called Dope Sick. This series is available on Netflix and Amazon. If you have not watched it, I would highly suggest watching it. A lot of good information regarding this crisis is available. So Dope Sick offers an in-depth glimpse into the effects of prescriptions OxyContin on rural communities, and also depicts how Purdue Pharmacy persuaded doctors to prescribe the drug. Overprescribing opioids like OxyContin has led to a serious prescription drug problem in the United States, as we just learned, and is one of, if not the main, contribution to what is going on currently in the opioid crisis. So I'd like to conclude this video with saying that help is available. So if anyone you know is suffering from addiction, there are treatment centers and hotlines that can help. So please, I urge you not to wait before it's too late. SAMHSA is a national helpline and is a free, confidential 24/7, 365-day-a-year treatment referral and information service for individuals and their families facing mental and or substance use disorders. Please call the number listed in the video, 1-800-662-HELP. Again, I hope this information you found presented in this video was informative, and I hope you can make your own conclusions based on the information I provided, whether or not Purdue Pharmacy is in fact responsible for the opioid crisis.